You go to displate.com/destinyofficial. Look at this, guys. Look at all these metal posters you can get. Look at how cool this is. Wow, they look great in real life. We've looked at them on stream, okay? When you buy these posters, you can use Destiny 15 to get a 15% discount. I actually really like these posters. I was really, really close to buying one anyway. The only reason I didn't was because I was about to pull the trigger on it, but I was just going on one of my infamous vacations. But yeah, these are really cool. They're pretty heavy. They give like sticks or whatever, or stickers for you to like stick them to the wall and stuff. They look really cool in real life. This is a metal poster. Look how cool it is. Look at how vibrant the colors are. Look at how metallic it is. Look at how solid it is. That's not breaking. It's not breaking. It's not bending. It's cool as fuck, okay? Fucking buy this shit. Holy shit. Hey, what's up?
Hi, what's going on? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. How you doing?
I'm okay. I was showing people my hat and my wig for something in the future. Yeah, I don't really know what to talk about. I was like, oh, I wonder who I should talk to.
Okay, what
Yeah.
conversation do you want to do? Hit me up.
Do you want to talk about like egoism in general?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, go for it.
Okay. I don't like just go for it. I'm like not sure what to say exactly.
I'll literally talk about anything you want to talk. So when I say go for it, I mean like it's not like there's no problem or whatever.
Okay. I'm okay. Let me open up my OneNote just in case. I don't have any notes written down for this one, but I just in case I want to write something down, you know?
Okay.
So like earlier I asked you what your here. Let's title this egoism. Cute. So you think wanting things, do you think it's inherently selfish?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
This is gonna sound like a strange question, but why exactly?
I mean, I guess it's a little bit, it's a bit of a tautology. Like, it's, I guess, like, by definition, if you want something, it's something that you want, and that would make it, like, a selfish desire. They seem to be one and the same.
So, like, would wanting, like, I don't know, water or food, you'd consider that selfish?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Although I guess it depends on how we get into, like, defining selfish. Selfish is a pretty morally loaded word or whatever, I guess, or it can be.
Okay, then let's try to define selfish, right? Because, like, for me, whenever I think about, like, selfishness or if somebody's selfish or not, I think, like, that they're putting their needs above somebody's others. They're putting their needs above, or sorry, their wants above somebody else's needs, without really taking into consideration the other person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd say that's like the general definition of selfish is usually when people say it, they say like you're doing it at the expense of somebody else or at the expense of some obligation. Yeah.
Okay. Slash. Okay. So with this definition, would you consider like a person who wants like water or food selfish still, or not really?
Under that definition, no, I wouldn't.
Okay.
With reasonable assumptions, assuming you're not like stealing food from a kid or something like that that's starving. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So let me get something straight about okay, yeah. So for you, egoism is all about like, everybody's technically doing something for their own benefit, right?
Yeah, or things stem from people's desires. I like that descriptive position because it seems to give me a good understanding of how people function. That if you can make people want something, that they'll do something, or that people do things because they want to do things, rather than those desires are stemming from some immaterial plane or from some other unanalyzable system or, I don't know if there's a word there, but some other system that can't be analyzed or whatever. Yeah?
Okay, then maybe I'm just having a problem with egoism because I have like beef with the idea that that desire is inherently selfish, you know?
Sure.
Because the whole thing is like, yeah. So because egoism, at least like it's I don't say it's interpretation, but its connotation, right, is that like people are inherently selfish beings. However, I don't think a want is inherently selfish. They're really doing something at the expense of somebody else by just wanting something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I guess like, I don't have like, I'm super anti-realist when it comes to morals. And then when I try to figure out like what people want, like I'm a big believer in like victim of circumstance. So for instance, if you put people in environments, you get predictable people. Like you're not going to put a bunch of people in the ghetto and get like a ton of like business people out of it. It's just not going to happen. You're most likely going to get criminals. Or if you put a bunch of people into rich families and into rich schools, you're going to get businessmen and not criminal, like stuff like that. And I feel like when I view things through the lens of egoism, like people generally do, or people like have a set of desires that they seek to fulfill, then it gives you to the ability to analyze, okay, well, like what are people's desires and why do they desire them? And then that gives me like better descriptive powers over how people will act in the future or like how to change their behavior. And that's typically why I prefer that stance, I guess.
Okay, so I'm just a little bit confused. Would you consider egoism a selfish ideology?
A selfish ideology, like an
Or, like,
an ideology
it's-
you have to be selfish to have, or an ideology that like talks about selfishness.
Yeah, an ideology that talks about selfishness, that like believes that people are like selfish.
Yeah, but just not the one with all the morally loaded connotations, just the one that says that like people have a set of desires that they seek to fulfill. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think that every person will always like maximize somebody else's or maximize like their own benefit over somebody else's. That's immediately observable to be not true, right? Like parents maximize their children's well-being over themselves, or a soldier that'll throw himself on a grenade or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it would be
Damn
better if I changed the word selfish to like self-driven or self-motivated or something. Maybe like that, because selfish is such a loaded word. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Damn it. I was hoping to disagree.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine. It's my fault for getting too excited and being like, oh, I don't think people are inherently selfish.
Sure, of course, yeah. That's a pretty nihilistic way to view the world, I think. Well, and not true. Like immediately not true, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sad now. I was so ready to fight.
I think I have that. This is like, I think, don't quote me on this. I think descriptive egoism, I think, is a meta-ethical position. So if we understand meta-ethics to mean like descriptions of like what is goodness, I don't believe I think this is a super hot take from a music school dropout. I think that all of meta-ethics is bullshit. I don't think there's any good work that goes on there, and I think it's all a waste of time. So like my meta-ethical position is basically just that like people have like desires that they try to fulfill, and that's it. That's where people's morality comes from. I think that all meta-ethics is post hoc rationalized. I don't think there is anybody that will ever be able to like debate somebody into a meta-ethical position that they don't already personally jive with. I think when we spoke off stream, the example that I gave before was like, let's say you have like the person that's read all of Hegelian shit, all of Kant shit, like he knows all of like the perfect like Kant meta-ethical positions in the category, right? That if there was like a lost chapter of Kant that was discovered, that perfectly with 100% like deductive logical argumentation would have showcased that like the maximum amount of good, or there would be like a categorical imperative for adults to fuck 2-year-old children, that nobody would be like, oh well, if that's what goodness is, we'll do it. They would instead, that would be such an incongruence with their own personal feelings on what is right or wrong, on what they have preferences for, that they would immediately reject Kant and they would jump to another moral system. Because I think that all meta-ethical positions, in my opinion, feel post hoc rationalized. Like it's whatever kind of jives with your intuitive feelings on what is right or wrong. That's what I feel.
Okay, so you also believe like morality is derived from emotion then?
100%. I don't believe that moral statements are ever refer to any kind of truth value, or that they don't refer to any facts of the world, that any moral statement is just an expression of a desire. When somebody says killing is wrong, what they're really saying is, I don't like killing.
Okay, so I have another question for you. So I think like something that I come across when it comes to egoism a lot that like annoys me, or that I don't feel is true, is that when people talk about egoism, they're like, oh, well, okay, just bear with me. I'm not sure if I'm going to really be the most eloquent. People are like, oh yeah, they're always doing it at the end of the day, like for themselves. But I guess what they could be referring to is just a want of doing something that's technically for themselves, but not for like the reward, right? Do you think people always do something for the like possible reward or something that they get after doing the action?
They could. Wait, I'm sorry. Could you explain that one more time? Hold on. I need to focus 100%. Go.
That's okay. I feel like most people, when they talk about egoism, they do it with a framework in mind that people are always whenever they do an action, it's always like for some sort of reward or a good feeling that they get afterwards. Do you agree with that?
It's possible, yeah. And I might agree with that. It depends on how vacuous we want to get with the definition of reward, I guess, right? Because if you want to say like reward is like a feeling that you fulfilled, like an obligation to society, then I would probably agree with it, right? Or you fulfilled some obligation to your own like personal moral code or something.
Cause okay, cause like this is like something that I kind of like mentioned to you before. So when it comes to, this is gonna sound really strange, but when it comes to like, for example, ADHD, right? The way like the ADHD brain like nervous system works is that it's like an interest-based nervous system. So people who have ADHD, even though they understand the concept of reward and like punishment and like, oh, you know, like you should do this because after you do this, you can get this or whatever. It literally it doesn't like really, even though they understand it conceptually, it doesn't actually like register in the brain that well, right?
Sure.
Like your brain like actually isn't, that's not enough for I guess like motivation, right? So you know, ADHD is just really weird, and it just decides that when it comes to things that you find important, who knows, for whatever reason, or no, sorry, things that you're interested in for whatever reason, you can suddenly like focus and do them and be like super into them.
Sure.
But when it comes to things that you're not interested, you're a little bit fucked, right?
Sure.
So the reason why I'm saying this is because like when it comes to people who talk about like, oh, people are always doing it for the reward or what they get afterwards, to me like ADHD kind of goes like directly against that, because it doesn't really like register like, okay, the reward that's coming afterwards. It's more based on the interest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would say I don't know if I would take on their argument depending on how they want to define that reward thing, but like the steelman position of that argument would basically be, they would say, well, like mental illness doesn't factor in here. Like much the same way that we wouldn't say that somebody that has Parkinson's and spills coffee on their grandma was satisfying a preference to spill coffee on their grandma. Like we would say that a person with ADHD is like cognitively or neurologically impaired such that they can't express those preferences because some disease is preventing them from doing so. That would be like probably the steelman version of that argument. But then now that draws back into like very interesting things where we start talking about determinism, because arguably like every choice we make, whether it's ADHD or mental illness or not, is about as determined as any other. But things get kind of weird at that point.
Do you believe in like predeterminism?
Yes, 100%. I believe the entire universe is fully determined, with the exception that maybe there's some quantum weirdness that presents that from.
Yeah, I was about to be like, what doesn't like quantum mechanics like go against that kind of?
No, not necessarily. No, not necessarily. But even if we did say that there was some random and truly unknowable or indeterminable value that causes actual real life randomness, not like we can't measure randomness, but real randomness to appear, that still doesn't get us anywhere to free will. So even if the universe isn't fully determined, like all the possible branching paths are fully determined, and we have no choice over which one we take.
Okay, this is something I definitely have to like make an argument chart for. But just spitballing here, right?
Yep.
Just humor me. So what? You believe that predeterminism is a thing, except for the exception, like, you know, quantum weirdness. Why do you think quantum mechanics isn't enough to like completely kind of tear apart predeterminism?
My understanding right now is that there are many interpretations of quantum mechanics that don't actually call for true randomness to exist. That like wave functions express probabilities of like maybe positions of particles, and they appear random to us, but that's just because we lack the sufficient ability to measure the current like space and velocity of a particle. That's my understanding of it, but that gets really complicated. Go ahead.
Yeah, I might sound really ignorant, right? But my understanding was like basically like quantum mechanics kind of like assure that like, let's say like this event is going to happen and there's like a 60% like chance that this thing will happen, a 40% chance like B will happen instead. You know, there's, even if it's like 60-40, it's not always going to be like 60%, right? Like you'll never actually fully be able to like predetermine which one it's going to be.
Yeah, but the question is whether or not that 60%, like it's whether or not when we collapse the wave function, I think, is like, does it cause that thing to appear like in that exact space and velocity or whatever? What does it measure? Like the position and speed of a particle, I think, or whatever, or the position and velocity of a particle. It's whether or not like, does that thing beforehand, does the universe know where it is, or is it actually truly random and it doesn't appear until like that precise moment, and there's no way that even the universe, if it could know, would know beforehand? Like that's like that's, and I've had this argument a couple times on stream, not argument, because I don't really have the sufficient level of technical expertise to argue this for obvious reasons. But like when I've had physicists that email me, they say that like just because we talk about wave functions in terms of probability doesn't mean that there's actually a probability of the particle existing. It's just more so that like we speak in probabilities because we don't know exactly where something exists, so we can only speak in probabilities. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have an actual point in space. If that makes sense? Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say, I don't know, let's say theoretically speaking, you know, quantum mechanics, like that actually is like, we somehow confirm that's the other interpretation, right? That it's like, oh no, like if we can't ever actually fully measure it, right? Because it's just actually truly random. Why would you think that determinism is still a thing?
Why do you think the determinism is still a thing if what?
Why would you think determinism is still a thing if the whole like interpretation of like, oh no, like true randomness is actually true?
Well, if true randomness is true, then determinism isn't a thing, but free will isn't a thing either. No matter what the position in quantum mechanics is, I don't believe that free will is a thing ever. Even if things were random at a quantum level and then they manifested on like a macro level that actually changed like big systems or whatever, even if that was true, it's not like we can consciously collapse wave functions or that we can exert pressure over like the existence of wave functions in our brain to cause a difference in neurotransmitters. Or, like we can't do that, so that doesn't matter.
So, okay. So, okay, I need to like obviously like read up more on like, you know, on this in specific, but
sure. I think in my opinion, if you do you know like physicalism or materialism? Do those words mean anything to you?
Yeah, I've read about materialism, but it's been some time.
The only way you can do like free will arguments is you're going to have to argue for some type of non-physical or immaterial entity. Because if you want to do free will from a materialistic point of view, you basically have to break causality, which is impossible in our current world. You can't have non-causal things, right?
Okay. Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from, kind of.
That like I would basically say like the brain. So like I would say like if you roll a rock down a hill from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill in a closed system, you can measure 100% where that rock will land with 100% accuracy every time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but then that isn't like isn't that thing go back to like quantum mechanics that there's gonna be times that like you're never gonna actually predict that?
Well, sure, but we can argue that like maybe quantumly, maybe it causes something to move like an atom or two. But like even if it does, it's not like the rock is choosing to go somewhere else. That's just a random thing that the rock has no control over.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I see where you're going with this argument.
Yeah. So the analogy would be I would make the hill more and more complex, where the rock would roll down a hill with some trees, with some rocks. It might take twisting and curving paths, but that ultimately, where that rock winds up on the bottom, the rock has no control over that. It's just following some predetermined path. Maybe it changes by a micrometer or a micron or like an atom or two because of some quantum randomness, but the rock's not choosing that. And then I would argue that our brains are exactly the same. We don't choose like the environment we're born into. We don't choose the set of circumstances that delivers us to at any point in time, and all like of the thoughts and everything we have are just based on the antecedent causes that led to that wherever we are in current space and time. Does that make sense? That was really wordy. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. But I have like a question to ask you then. So you know, tell me if you think that I'm wrong at any point. So do you like, you know, evolutionary speakingly, right? Everything we have kind of comes for a reason, right?
I wouldn't agree with that, but I know what you're saying.
What part would you not agree with? Because like even like our appendix has like a reason for it, right?
I would be really careful, just because I've had this argument with race realists so much. Using the expression "we have things for a reason" seems to ascribe some sort of intent to the process of evolution, and I'm really uncomfortable doing that. I think evolution is purely descriptive. Some things tend to work, some things don't work, but I'm really careful when it's like we have this for a reason. I don't use that expression. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me continue and then
sure, go for it. Yeah.
Interrupt me, I guess. Because like the reason why I would say that is because like evolutionary speakingly, like we developed hands for a reason, feet, like everything in our body is there because of a response of like trying to like you know kind of survive, right? So like, and adapt to an environment. Yeah,
so the reason why I wouldn't say that is because some things can evolve as a byproduct of other things. So for instance, breasts are a secondary sexual feature that females tend to develop after going through puberty. Men seem to be attracted to these things. It's very easy. Have you ever, I might have used this expression last time we talked. Did I explain to you what a just so story is? Or have I ever said just so story?
Oh, you mentioned it to me.
Yeah.
But I have the memory of a grain of rice
Yeah,
in
that's
my
fine. I
mind.
don't remember what we were talking about, but like a just so story. Oh yeah, it was in regards to things in my past or whatever. A just so story is like you have a set of things and now you tell a story to explain those things, but you have no way to know if the story is true or false. So like we could say that women developed breasts in order to attract mates as males. But it might be that women, maybe they developed breasts because maybe women that had breasts and women that didn't, maybe the ones that had breasts had an easier time feeding their children. So maybe women develop breasts to feed their children. Or maybe breasts literally are just a byproduct of how some bodies respond to estrogen. And that's really it. Maybe there was no evolutionary advantage to having them in attracting mates or in feeding children. Maybe it's literally just an accident. Because there's a lot of genetic garbage material that can get, not that breasts are garbage material, there's a lot of like genetic garbage material that can get copied, from one thing to another that gets carried through, like certain traits that get carried through. There's a name for this. I don't remember it. But there are certain things that can get carried through for no reason. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry, but maybe it's my misunderstanding of like how evolution works. But I
Sure.
thought like the whole, all those like genetic traits that get carried over, or the ones that like usually stay,
Generally, yeah.
um, are because of evolution, right? Because nature was like, oh, this works for our survival, or like it doesn't have to be even perfect, right?
Well,
But
yeah,
it's like,
but there's like, I'm just saying that like sometimes you can have traits that are passed on and they're not even selected for. They just happen by luck to be more present in a population. Or sometimes maybe some trait can evolve, but there's not actually a reason for it. It's just a byproduct of something else that there was a reason for. And maybe that original thing that there was a reason for doesn't even exist anymore. Like for instance, like the way that our eyes evolved, we have a very weird, the blind spot we have in our eyes? That's because all of the nerves and everything pass through it because of the way that I forget all the names of the eyes, but the way that like the lens or whatever is overlaid on I don't remember what the back is called, but like that whole thing should be reversed so that you don't have that hole in your eye. But like there's not like an evolutionary reason for that. It's probably just a byproduct of other evolutionary things. That's why this sounds like so nitpicky. I don't mean to be really nitpicky like this.
No,
I got
it's
into,
fine.
I had to do a whole stint on fucking evolutionary psych and evolutionary biology because of my debates with race realists. So one of the things that I learned about evolution is that if you say like, oh, evolution happens with a purpose, that like anybody that studies like evolutionary biology will grill the fuck out of you on it. So I try to be really careful not to make that mistake. I would never say that evolution is like purposefully guided. Rather, it's a description that sometimes in certain environments, there are certain traits that are more advantageous. They tend to survive more and they'll be passed on. But none of it is purpose driven. None of it happens for a reason. And sometimes traits we have are totally fucking random. They're just a byproduct of something else. Or it managed to spread into civilization by accident. I don't think that any of this is relevant to your argument. I'm sorry, I'm being like really pedantic on this, but like,
It kind of is. It kind of
Okay.
is
Yeah.
because what I was gonna start talking about was I see no evolutionary purpose for us to develop a conscious if everything was just a product of what happened before it. Like, if everything was already like predetermined, there would be no literal reason for us to develop the ability to kind of choose.
Yeah, so like for that, I would say there's no reason for anything. I don't believe in reasons for things. I think things just happen.
Okay. Okay, that's okay. I'm having trouble kind of understanding because then it goes back to what you were saying before of like, oh, some traits just happen to survive. If not, I'm kind of confused how you went from like some traits just happen to survive to like, oh, there's no reason for anything.
When I say there's no reason, I mean like things don't happen for a reason. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, things don't happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound like an idiot.
No,
I'm
you're
just
fine.
genuinely confused.
Mm-hmm.
Because if nothing happens for a reason, then evolution wouldn't even be a thing.
Okay. So the confusion is in the word reason. So when I say nothing happens for a reason, maybe this is kind of vacuous, but like I don't think that I think that things just exist and things just happen, but there's not like some greater plan or there's not some greater architecture or
Yeah,
something like that.
I'm not referring to like a greater plan. I'm saying like, oh yeah, if you have like, I don't know, a population of squirrels, that were like white or whatever to survive like in the winter, and like, white and brown squirrels, then the white squirrels would like probably end up surviving longer and like reproducing their genes and stuff because it would, because it's an evolutionary like advantage, right?
Yeah.
So like that's a reason why there's a lot of white squirrels.
Yeah, I believe in those types of reasons. Sure. Yes.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So we keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's the type of reason I'm talking about. But the thing is, like, if everything is like predetermined to begin with, what would be like the evolutionary reason to like be able to choose and have a conscious,
Well,
like,
things can still be predetermined, but those things can still arise for. Oh, I see where the confusion is. So when you say what's the reason for things happening if everything is predetermined, it sounds to me like you're saying, well, what's like the reason, like for a purpose or existence or whatever. But what you're really saying is literally like, why does something need a justification for something else if everything is predetermined? Well, I mean, I don't think those two things are related to each other, like whatsoever. Like I would say, like I can have something that's predetermined and then still require like explanations for why things work or whatever.
yeah, but I mean, like the whole point of like being able to develop a consciousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to like have the ability to choose between A or B, C or D.
I mean, I don't think we make choices. I disagree with that. I reject that. For this level of analysis, I would reject that. I would say we don't really truly make choices.
Then we would never develop why like we wouldn't have developed a conscious to begin with then.
Wait, why not?
Because like the whole point, like the reason why there's like a consciousness to begin with is to give us like the ability to choose, no?
Well, like, I mean, I would argue that consciousness equips creatures, yeah, with the ability to choose, but you're not making true choices in like a deterministic sense. Like all of your choices are theoretically predetermined.
Okay. I'm gonna
so like I can try to give like an example here, okay? This is gonna be oh shit, I'm gonna spitball this. This might be really fucked, okay?
That's fine.
Okay, so like let's say that I have a ball that goes around and it can pick up either red things or blue things. Let's say red things are better for it than blue things, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say that this ball goes through the environment, picks up some red things, picks up some blue things. It's getting harmed by the blue things. Well, maybe I say, okay, well, hold on. This is actually crucial that I endow this ball with the ability to choose between like red things or blue things. So I'm going to give it the ability to choose between red or blue. I can set it forward on a path, and like that whole path could theoretically be predetermined, even though it's been given that choice, because now it'll just head towards the red things rather than the blue things. Does that make sense?
A little bit. Because if you're saying, okay, what if I set it on a path so it only chooses red things, right?
Yeah. Or yeah, whatever thing it chooses. Yeah.
Okay. I'm typing this down. So it only chooses red things. I don't want to be nitpicky.
No, that's fine. Go nitpick away.
Okay, so I don't know if your analogy exactly works or if I'm not exactly completely understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because like since you're technically like an outlier in that situation, like you're
What do you mean?
something outside. Because okay, you're acting as if like the ball and the red things and blue things are things like determined in the universe already. And then you're like, oh, what if I just set it in a path that chooses only red things? Mm-hmm. And maybe my mind isn't comprehending or whatever. But to me, that would like make you the equivalent of like an outside factor of the universe, right? So like.
Oh yeah, of course. In this sense, it would be, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not understanding the whole thing about relating this to developing a consciousness because.
Okay, so do you have my streamer right now?
No.
Okay, turn my stream on and I'll draw a quick picture and we'll see if this can work.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, I see it. At your stream.
Yeah, you there?
Yep. I see the red and blue balls.
So right now, let's say that I have a thing, okay? Boom. Okay, here's what he's going to do. He's going to go from ball to ball, eating everything, okay? So only the red ones are good for him, but he's just eating every fucking ball up here because he's fucking ball hungry, okay? Okay, there he goes. Now, this path is really suboptimal because it's wasting energy. Every blue ball it picks up is not helping it, and the red balls are the only thing helping it, right? So let's say that we endow this ball with the ability to differentiate between red and blue, okay? Now, even if I give it that choice, its path is still predetermined. It's going to go here, and it's going to go here, and it's going to go here, and then it's going to go there. So even though we gave it a choice, that didn't do anything about like our determined path. It just changed it. It just gave it a different determined path. So us having consciousness is the ability for us to quote unquote choose between different things. But that doesn't mean our path isn't still predetermined. It just gives us the better ability to make like better choices. But we're not really making choices. We're just like, it's just a different path that mechanism is setting us on down the environment. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I'm going to see if I can open up paint thing so I can show you. Oh, maybe I can do it in notes. Let's find out. Drop. Okay, I could do this in notes. Here, I'm gonna share my screen, I guess.
Okay, or I can just look at your stream.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's why I'm gonna do the thing, the stream, whatever. Words are hard. Woo. I feel so silly drawing these. Okay. Let's do a different color. Is this a different color? This is rainbow. Okay, yeah, cool, rainbow. Right. So you're like, oh, well, technically it's predetermined if, you know, it goes from here, here, and here, but we just made it like, you know, just because it does this instead of...
But what if there are an infinite amount of different colored
instead
balls?
Instead of right? This looks like a mess. Basically, you're like, oh, well, just because it decides to do only niggas doesn't mean only like the rainbow colored ones doesn't mean that nothing was predetermined, right? It just chose that path instead, right?
Yeah, because it was the most efficient, logical, obvious path or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe I just like need to read more about this to understand better, right? If I don't get after this, like forget it. We can like talk about something else. But what my beef with this is that it's like, give me a second to try to like articulate.
Sure.
What, like, even if, yeah, how could this whole path be possibly predetermined if we have a scenario where we can literally decide to go this way or that way?
It's predetermined because the
like,
I was saying it's predetermined because the ball is literally only choosing rainbow paths.
Okay, so you're saying it doesn't matter if we choose this or this, since it's like a rainbow path, it's still predetermined.
Yeah, that it would just choose like the most optimal rainbow path.
Okay, I think I understand.
Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't like this, like even if it's still a rainbow path, like wouldn't this choice still matter?
No, because it's not a real choice. It's the illusion of choice. The thing thinks that it's making a choice. Well, no, it doesn't have sufficient processes yet to think it's making a choice. But like right now, it's like it's just choosing like what we can predict every choice it will make.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna have to think about this more, but I think I understand where you're coming from and stuff like that. So basically, TLDR, illusion of free will. You're still picking a rainbow path at the end of the day. Okay, I have one more. Well, I guess like one more thing, right? Your whole like statement about like causality, right?
Yeah.
That you'd have to prove like an immaterial or non-material thing.
Something that violates causality. Yeah.
What about like the first thing, right?
Fuck that shit. So there are two ways to basically go around that. So one is, the easiest way is to just say that the universe is infinite. Yeah.
Is infinite?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the problem is like I can't speak to you outside of logic. Like when we start to say like, well, imagine that like deductive reasoning wasn't real. Imagine like if n then p or whatever, or if p then q doesn't happen. Like I can't even, my human mind can't even fathom like a world where contradictions can exist or whatever. And I would throw causality into there as well. I can't even imagine something happening without something happening before it. I literally can't even fathom it. So I have to say that like I think I have to, like epistemically, I have to say that the universe is eternal or something existed before that caused the universe. I can't fathom a world where that law is like violated. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. You're an atheist, right?
Yeah, I'd say so I use the phrase agnostic atheist, but I have varying pushback on how valid this phrase is, yeah. But like, I'm an atheist because I believe in no God. I'm agnostic because I don't believe that we can have knowledge about the existence of gods. I don't think we can have knowledge about immaterial things, but I don't currently believe in a God. So I'd say I'm an agnostic atheist. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because have you ever read Thomas Aquinas?
Thomas Aquinas?
Yeah.
It's okay. You speak more languages than I do. It's fine. Yeah, he's the dipshit that gives the arguments for God, right?
Yeah, that's one of the arguments he gives. What is it? The first thing. Causality or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Fuck. What is that, guys? It's called like is it the cosmological argument or the teleological argument? There's basically some argument where like everything had a beginning. The universe had a beginning. Therefore, the universe was caused by God or something. It's an extended syllogism or whatever. But the problem with that syllogism is that one, if you can assume God is eternal, I can assume the universe is eternal. Or two, if you tell me that like every complicated thing needs a designer, like the universe, then I could say, well, then God needs a designer as well. Any escape that you use for God, I can equally apply to the universe, and then that argument falls on its face, I think.
There was I don't know, I took a problem of God class, right, where they were like giving arguments back and forth about God, and the whole point is like it's if God itself would be considered like an eternal, omniscient, omnipotent, or whatever being. So you know, if God itself, it's like the universe is not eternal, but God is eternal. But you know, that's. I don't really necessarily agree with that because at the end of the day, that's just a faith thing, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say. I was like that. I'm glad I learned something new today, and I have some things to think about.
Sure.
Yeah. Is there any other hot takes you have, or not hot takes?
No, I don't think so.
Takes in general. Okay. I ran out of things to talk about then.
Okay. Well, hey, listen. Thanks for the thanks for the conversations, buddy.
I enjoyed the conversation too. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.
So that 10% difference, right, between like the highest performing athletes in the male category and female category.